Good morning, everyone, and welcome with Birding with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension and to Cup Chat. So we all have our cups this morning. Mine is from England. You'll know different cup every time. And Bill has a very special cup this morning. Bill, you want to show everybody your cup and why you have it? You were very excited about it.
Yes, it looks like there's too much glare on here, but my favorite bird is a roadrunner. So I have a roadrunner cup. There's a bit of a roadrunner there, and then right in here as well.
Well, we can see all of your roadrunners in the back, and we're super excited to have special guests with us today, Bill Sain and Dorian Anderson, two of our special guides for Birding the Border. And I call them special because they are guiding some of our more unique and specialized trips. So Bill is going to be actually guiding for our beginner trips, and Dorian is going to be guiding for our photography focus trip. So we're excited to have y'all on today and talk a little bit about y'all birding the border and just chat with our cups. So let's kind of start off with, how did y'all start birding? So maybe, I hate to tell y'all, we keep it down to 30 minutes. So give me the abbreviated version if it's a long one, but let's hear it.
Well, Bill, you started in the Pleistocene, so why don't you go first?
Well, I can prove that dragons, actually evolved into birds because I watched the transition. And I'm sorry, I said dragons, I meant dinosaurs. The dragons came later. So I got started birding sort of in a unique way. I was always like the outdoors. I tried fishing, hunting, camping, hiking, but none of those, those were all great, but they really didn't do it for me. And then I started hanging out with some birders and started going out into birding, and I with them birding, and I got the introduction into birds and found that interesting. But it's really more the social aspect to birding that I enjoy. Getting to meet people from all over the country, all over the world, and having an instant link, something in common with all these people. If I meet a birder, even if we don't speak the same language, we have that connection and we can communicate about the birds. And that's something that I found very intriguing about birding. It also helps. I have a severe case of wanderlust, and birding helped give a more structure to that. Give me more places to go and more reasons to go to different places.
Oh, Bill, that just touches my heart. I think I've got tears in my eyes. I'm not even lying. I think that's so true. You find these connections with people, and you have such a common interest in a community that, that we talk about this sometimes, and Dorian, for you don't know that I'm a little kind of a livestock girl. Don't always go to the birding world, but it's so true. There's birders all over the country, and when you're out and about, you always have a friend or a common interest of somebody in that birding community that can come change your tire. And it's so funny because I think did you go save Connie, one of our birding buddies, or did she save you?
Connie saved me. I was at a birding location there in Del Rio, and my car wouldn't start. And it was like 6 or 8 blocks to the nearest house. So I started walking that way, and this car drove by. And this woman stopped and asked me if I needed any help. And I said, yes, my battery's dead. Can you, I have battery, jumper cables. And it turned out to be Connie Hoke, who's going to be my birding buddy for this birding the border.
Small world. Well, Dorian, tell us a little bit about your story.
I started really young. So I used to live downtown in Philadelphia, like in the urban jungle, until I was like 6 or 7 years old. And then my family moved we're still in the city limits of Philadelphia, but it looked so like traditionally suburban, where people had yards and there were trees and things. So that happened when I was 6 or 7 years old. And so I went from having no backyard, no animals, no birds, no anything, to all of a sudden at that age when my parents are starting to trust me to kind of go and do my own thing in the backyard, to having all these birds around. So I'd see woodpeckers, and I'd see nuthatches and wrens and robins and even warblers and things in my yard. And I wanted to know what it all was. And so I eventually found a pair of binoculars in my dad's stuff. And then my mom got me a bird book, and I started sitting around in the backyard and trying to figure out what everything was. And then I got we bought a bird feeder. And then, so that brought in some different birds into the yard. And then I would take my binoculars when I went to the beach. And then I took them when I went to camp, and then eventually ended up going to bird watching camp. So it just, mine started like in the backyard and then grew outward from there. And I ended up as a scientist. So I have this natural curiosity, and I just found that birding was a way to be curious wherever I went. I didn't need other people to do it. I didn't need to bring a whole bunch of stuff. I could just roll up with my binoculars. So it eventually, as Bill said, ended up being an excuse to hang out with people and a reason to travel and a window to the world. But it really started as like, just what are these critters, these things in my backyard, and can I kind of put a name and learn a little bit about each one?
I love that. Those of y'all in Texas that have listened to some of my programs before, and actually this goes back to while I was doing my PhD, but I love talking about what's right in your backyard and encouraging people, and especially this has been really, applicable this year, is that you can find things right in your backyard. You don't necessarily have to travel to go do it. And so this is one of my favorite talks to give, is just how to make backyard bird habitat. And there's actually kind of some growing recognition of how important that is, that it's not just something that we do to see birds, but actually making favorable habitat in those yards is valuable, because we have so many urban areas that to connect, especially for migrating birds, and we need to connect their wintering and their breeding grounds, that there's a lot of value to that. So I think that's awesome that that's where you started.
Yeah, just organically, so to speak. I mean, neither of my parents birded, and I just found it when I was like, as I said, 6 or 7. My parents thought I was crazy, and they just were like, "What do we do with this bird-obsessed kid?" So they just kind of like dumped me at the beach, bird dumped me at the woods, and I figured it out.
That's awesome.
That is absolutely super cool. So now we kind of got y'all stories. One thing we like to ask is, as guides, y'all have to have these awesome tips and tricks to identify birds, because you're guides, right? And so some people, as we go out birding, lots of times we go to the instant ones, the color, the very specific things that are easy to go to. What's maybe your underlying overlooked ID tip or trick that you think most people don't always think of first that could be super helpful?
Bill, you want to do this one? We'll just go you, me. That'll keep it easy.
That's good. We'll do it alphabetically. Bill, Dorian. Most of the field guides focus in on field marks, the colors, placement of stripes and things like that. But those things aren't always the easiest thing to see right away. So what I find is that if you study the birds enough, you kind of get a feel for how they act. You look at the habitat, and then you see how they're moving around, what their posture is, things like that will give you some significant keys to identify the bird. So that's what I think is something that a lot of people start focusing on, these things like, let's say the orange crowned warbler or the ruby crowned kinglet. You look for a crown that's ruby or orange, but you don't always see those in the field. They don't always show. So you can't always go with the field marks. You have to kind of look at the overall picture before you decide on an ID. And that's part of what I'm going to be doing, trying to teach people in the beginning birder track. I mean, we'll have people with all sorts of levels of experience. We'll have to figure out exactly how to do it. But that's something I'm going to talk to them about as well.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And we're super excited. Bill's going to guide that beginner track. And it's a little unique in our birding the border system, because you will bird with Bill every day, and you will bird with the same birders every day.
Whether you
so
want
you'll
to
really so you'll really have that opportunity to get comfortable and learn and have some open dialogue. And it won't be while there is a benefit in switching guides and learning from new people, we think that as a beginner it'll help you have some consistency, learning from one person, and then as you move forward and grow in your birding, picking up and going with different guides will be fun. So we're excited for Bill to take on that adventure. And he's super fun. I loved birding with him. So just loved it.
Yeah, we had a great time last week. I would also say, and I think I mentioned this last week, that one of the nice things too about birding with the same guide when you're a beginner is they get to know you a little bit. And so Bill can learn some of your strengths and weaknesses. And I did just want to mention that when we say beginner track, it is definitely for, beginning birders, but a wide range of people can learn from that. So if you're very new, that's totally fine. If you've got some experience, but you're like, man, that sounds like a good deal to spend, some dedicated time with Bill, that's also okay. Just be willing, come in to bird with Bill, willing to learn and know that he's going to cover, that it'll just be a little bit different focus. Not so much as how many species can we get as to, although you are birding the duck pond, I think, right? That's yes. one of our bets for our highest species places. But it's just more of a focus on making sure that everybody knows what the bird is and why we know that it's that species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to echo a bit of what Bill said, there is an emphasis on plumage and color in field guides, and I think that using shape and behavior is really important, because color can change depending upon the lighting conditions. So a bird at the beginning of the day can look pink, and then by the time the sun is overhead, all the color can be washed out, but the shape isn't going to change at all during that time. Even backlit shorebirds, when you're doing woodland birding, you have to rely a bit more on individual field marks, but especially for water birds, being able to use shape and proportion is really helpful. So I can identify most of the sandpipers backlit because I know their shapes and proportion and leg lengths and bill lengths and so on and so forth. When we do pelagic birding, I lead pelagic trips here on the West Coast. Everything is flight style because the birds are going to be moving really, really fast, and it's really difficult to see plumage details on birds from far away, and when the bird is moving quickly and when the boat is bobbing around. So learning flight styles, like there's one fly really low to the water, or there's one fly in these big swooping arcs. These kind of like behavioral things really, really help, because, and color, the other thing is that, like, especially for things like gulls, they undergo like a 3 or 4 year molt cycle or maturation cycle. You have to learn 4 times as much, but if you can build structure into your identification, the structure of the bird doesn't change at all through that whole time. So knowing who has like a really blocky head versus who has a more rounded head, compact body versus long wings, that stuff really allows you to make an ID faster. The other thing is that it's helpful to know what isn't there. So beginning birders aren't so worried about rarities. So understanding what is not here, what do I not have to include in my query or my analysis right off the bat really helps. So learning the range maps of who's there and who isn't, or what is there and what isn't, is going to kind of narrow your search parameters and your search possibilities down as quickly as possible. There's no point learning how to identify a wren tit if you live in Texas, because they're only in California and Oregon, right? So.
Yeah, and since we won't be seeing as a whole lot of shorebirds in where we are in Texas, the other thing that I would say that applies to, and that I personally definitely need to work on, is hawks, right? And so, their size and proportions of their head, and their body and their tail and their wings. And so that's actually something that we do have in this area that Emily knows I'm always checking for. Even yesterday, a vulture flew over and I was like, I have to check it to make sure it's not a zone-tailed hawk. And that's just one of those things that, depending on how they're flying, I'm like, oh, that one might be different. But you kind of, pay attention to those different, those different appearances of those birds, and then it can definitely help you pick out when there's something unusual. They were all black vultures yesterday, but we have seen zone-tailed hawks in the area that we'll be in.
Well, and I think that that's a great lead-in answer to the next question. We are talking to 2 very experienced birding guys and very proficient birders. And the next question we lead into is, why is it beneficial to bird with a guide? What's the difference of experience to y'all? And I think that just listening to you, Dorian, and this is the first time I've ever met Dorian because we're on Zoom, but that was just mind-boggling and so inquisitive of now I'm like, oh, I think I'm going to have to go on one of his trips. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's just such a difference of being able to learn from different people and getting that knowledge. So that's my answer of why you should bird with different guides. But Bill and Dorian, you'll have a different opinion or special things that you really think birding with guides is more beneficial or creates a better experience. Go for it.
I think that birding with a guide is helpful, especially with the beginning birders, because you need somebody to learn from. I mean, you can go out there, like Dorian talked about, and learn it on your own, And perhaps that's the best way for you as an individual to learn. But to have somebody out there that can point out different field marks, different ways that the birds are acting, highlight that, you know, this is their habitat or this is not their habitat. Frequently, you'll see a bird out of habitat, and you want to make sure that the birder knows that. So they, sorry, I'm getting messages popping up on my screen here. It's also good to have a guide that knows where they're going, so you don't get lost. Although I can't guarantee that I won't get lost. But that's why we have Connie. She's going to rescue me again.
Yes, that's why all our guides are with a local buddy who knows where they're going.
So you don't have to worry about your route. You don't have to sit down and figure out exactly where you have to go. You can just focus on the birds.
Yes.
So
And we
Yeah, I
really,
think,
go ahead,
yeah, I
Dorian.
think that whole route thing is really important. Just that's one of the most important things when you guide like an international tour is putting people, especially when you're in an unfamiliar area, is putting people at ease that everything is going to be okay. That like when I take people to the mountains in Colombia, they know that, okay, this guy's been here before. This is going to be okay, because I'm a little nervous going to Colombia, although they shouldn't be because it's like super safe, right? But somebody to worry about the logistics so that clients don't have to is a really big part of it. The other thing is that I find that when you bird with people, and specifically with a guide, like a field guide, you can sit there and read about, you can read the descriptions and read what the bird should look like and so on and so forth, but it doesn't provide a lot of context to remember things. Whereas when you're out in the field and you bird with the guide, and the guide says, okay, let's talk about this species. When you encounter that species again in the future, you have a bit of contextual memory on which you can recall to help you identify that species in the future. So I remember like specific aspects of talking with Doug Gotchfeld about how do I identify a ruby crown kinglet. Doug Gotchfeld is a guide for a birding company. He's birds guides all over the world. But I remember speaking with him about how do you know a ruby crown kinglet versus a Hutton's vireo, and like my interaction with him gives me context when I'm trying to separate those two birds on the West Coast. So
Dorian,
that helped a lot.
I love that, because as you were saying that, what immediately jumped to my mind was Susan Cooper, who used to be a wildlife researcher here in Uvalde, teaching me how to know what an orange-crowned warbler was. And I will never forget that she is who taught me, you know, specifically what to look for on that bird. So, and in the winter, you know, and a little bit less brightly colored. So I love that answer. And I also want to comment on what Bill said about, you know, having somebody teach you as opposed to learning it on your own. I think, you know, so for Dorian to have started really young, that is a super fun way to learn. And when you're a kid, you just kind of have those days stretched out before you, and, you know, the freedom in your schedule to go wander around. And I know Brian Koch talks about those context clues that he would hear a bird singing and he would just go find it. Like, it doesn't matter where it was, he would just haul it over there until he found the one singing. And so he could look it in the eye and say, you are who is singing, that's what you sound like. And so I think that's an awesome way to learn. But some of our beginner birders are maybe starting this as like a retirement hobby. And so you don't quite, it's like you want that accelerated version of getting to learn, because when you're starting as a kid, you've got all this time to learn those things on your own. But when you're older, and maybe even you're not retired, maybe you're just working, but you don't have those, you know, days on end to go track down birds. And so it's kind of nice to have a guide get you up to speed a little faster.
I completely agree. And for those of y'all who don't know, I started out with zero birding knowledge and have only learned what I know today because of Maureen and all of our professional guides, and in an environment where I don't have an expendable amount of time to go birding, except for when I'm working on our birding with extension stuff. And so I've been so fortunate to learn with some of the best and get to go, you know, I think that's one of the luckiest things that I've ever gotten to do is I get to bird with guides pretty much anytime I'm going birding, because that's what I get to do for my job. So I just get lucky. So, and
Emily,
Bill, I forgot your bird. I meant to get our pet bird from birding the other day, and I left him at home.
Well, I was going to say, you are welcome to join the beginning birder track.
I would love to, but I think people want food, and they want to make sure that the air conditioning's running, and they want to make sure their van is properly stacked with snacks, and they want the coffee bar. So I'm going to be making sure everybody's happy for you. And so I would love to join, but I'm just going to RSVP to a private beginner birding tour with all of our guides at some point. So let's talk a little bit about birding the border. Bill, you are guiding the beginner tract, and that is at a discounted pre-packaged rate of $400. And you get to go to the Duck Pond, the Zuberbeeler Ranch, and Dobbs Run Ranch. So you're really going from one end of Val Verde County, the westernmost part of Val Verde County, all the way to the northeastern part of Kinney County. So your range of species and varieties is going to be massive. And you are going to be birding on the duck pond, which we have started a little bit of a challenge on our cup chats for the most species list. And I know you are going to be focusing on those beginners, but think if the beginner birders took home the title. Think of how many bragging rights you would have on Brian and Romy.
I'm up against a pretty stiff challenge there, but Brian's got the home field advantage.
He's never truly birded the duck pond though.
Oh, okay.
You have birded
Fort Clark Springs, right? Because I think our 3 leading places are going to be Duck Pond, Fort Clark Springs, and Devil's River. And Brian does.
He does have Fort Clark Springs, and that is home field advantage.
But the Duck Pond is in Connie's neck of the woods. She's always around Del Rio, and that's where that is. So, and you'll have her as your buddy. So anything's possible.
Fingers crossed. And then you're going to go to Dobbs Run Ranch, which is on the northeastern part of the county. And that's where we typically find some golden cheeks and black-cap vireos. So we really hope that all of our beginner birders are going to get to have a wide variety of species and see a lot of different things. And really see the contrast of habitats. As you look at where birds live and where they don't live, all 3 properties are vastly different habitats. So we're excited to share that with you.
Now, the last one there, we're also going to the state park, correct? Kickapoo Caverns?
So we will kind of, it's kind of going to be a unique trip. We're going to send you to Dobbs Run Ranch first. And then afterwards, time will allow you, because it's on the last day, to duck over to Kickapoo. They have a really good bird line, and see some of that and hit some of the hot spots at Kickapoo, and see kind of what you can find. So it's kind of an unofficial double trip, but yes. Dorian, you are coming on for our first ever photography focused trips. We've always had some photography opportunities on a lot of our birding the border experiences. But this time you're the guy. And so some of these properties are going to be having blinds. Some of them you will sit and stay a bit longer. We want to focus that the photography focus trip is for those who already know how to use their camera. Dorian's not going to be giving a camera 101, but we're excited to help get you some great pictures and focus a little bit more on bird photography. And Dorian's going to be going to Kickapoo. They have a bird line there, and really awesome birding hotspots. And then we're going to take you to 2 private ranches. One is Transition Ranch, and that's in Kinney County. And this is an established bird photography ranch. And then the last place Dorian's going to be leading the photography focus trip is in McKenna Ranch. And this is up along the dry Devil's River. So just east of Devil's River State Natural Area. So we could see some of those crossover species. And she's working very hard to manage for birds and provide an awesome opportunity for our photographers out there. So we're super excited for that. But guys, what are y'all kind of excited about with birding with extension?
Well, I hear there's going to be a taco bar.
Yes, I knew you would give me the lead in. Thank you. There is. So we're super excited about our welcome dinner on Thursday night. We will be we would like for you to check some fun things off your bucket list, as well as birding, getting some great birds. We're going to be having our welcome dinner at the oldest bonded winery in Texas, and that's at the Valverde Winery. And so we are going to have a complete authentic taco bar for some heavy appetizers. So maybe you don't have to go find dinner. You'll meet our guides, you'll meet our landowners, and you'll meet our buddies. And so we're excited to have an awesome taco bar, Bill. I really think it's going to be fun.
And I think also the opportunity to for me to lead this beginning birder track is very important because it helps. I'm looking forward to that, helping people learn. I'm also looking forward to working with the other guides. Like, Dorian and I, we met probably 5 or 6 years ago when he was riding a bicycle all over the country to see how many birds he could see. And we've seen each other like once or twice a year. So this will be my first time, probably about 1.5 years to bird with Dorian, maybe even 2 years.
Well,
Yeah.
and we have guides literally coming from the opposite sides of the country because Dorian's in California and Martina's in North Carolina. So we really have from coast to coast.
Fun.
And then our Texas guides, although Katie's in Arkansas. Yeah. So we've really got guides from all over the place. So that'll be fun for everybody to get to know them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see some of the different habitats because I've birded a lot in Texas. Like I've birded the Upper Coast. I've spent a lot of time in the Rio Grande Valley, and then I basically rode my bike all the way from the Louisiana state line through Austin and then I-10 all the way west. But I haven't been to Del Rio, and I birded along kind of in Laredo as well. So Del Rio is interesting because it kind of sits at the interface between like the eastern part of the state and then like as you move west into the Chihuahuan Desert. And so you end up with all these overlap species. You have things like canyon wren and rock wren and black-throated sparrow and all these species that are more traditionally western, but you're still capturing things like scissortail flycatcher and painted bunting and some of the eastern birds as well. So I'm kind of interested to see what the habitat looks like on kind of a macro level, just kind of since I haven't been to Del Rio before. So I think that that'll be a lot of fun for me. And also like, I think that once you get into serious bird photography, you really have to start thinking differently than a birder. Like you really have to learn, you have to know where the light is coming from at all time. You have to really think about time of day. You have to think about stalking. You have to think about composition. There's not just the identification component. There's a lot more going on. There are more levels of thinking that are going on in photography to be able to create a really nice image. Because if you just walk around and hope to click pictures without any amount of premeditation, there's a bar to how good the photos can be. Whereas if you're saying, okay, I want to be here at this time of day to photograph this species, and these are the steps that I'm going to take to do it, then the results are going to be better. So helping people kind of come up with the premeditation to create a good image, because I'd say a solid like 30 to 40% of the image is what you're doing before you actually press the shutter. So, and people don't often realize that. They think that good bird photographs just kind of happen when you're walking around, and they don't. You really have to give some thought and some preparation ahead of time.
Add in there also, I do have a couple of framed photos around here someplace in another room that Dorian shot during his bicycle ride around the country.
Oh, that's
and he is an
cool.
excellent photographer.
Well, thank you, Bill.
And you do have an Instagram, so if people want to go check out your Instagram, you do have an Instagram with a lot of pictures on it, don't you, Dorian?
Yeah, I have an Instagram which is just Dorian_Anderson_photography. I've been really lazy with that in the last almost year, but my website, which is DorianAndersonPhotography.com, I'm still updating all the time. So I actually spend more time on my website now than I do on Instagram. But either one of those platforms will give you an idea of what kind of stuff I shoot.
Awesome. Well, and then here's a question for you. I know we're getting on. I could talk forever on Cup Chat. I really think. Do you prefer? This is just a fun fact, I guess. Do you prefer sitting in a blind photography or walking around and finding birds and then making that shot happen out as you're kind of moving and birding?
I personally prefer what's called field photography, because I think that there's much more of an earning the photograph component to it. Like you have to understand behavior. You have to learn how to stalk, but sitting in a blind is easier. It's way easier, especially if birds are conditioned to come to food. So for people who are learning or people who want like instant results, sitting in a blind is usually better. Now, there's also ways to set the blind up. Just having a blind doesn't necessarily guarantee good results. I think that this is one of the misconceptions with bird photography. There needs to be some thought as to like how to set everything up so that the shots aren't cluttered, for instance. But I generally prefer field photography. I also live on the coast where there's lots of ducks and shorebirds and gulls and other water birds and things. So those birds don't come to blinds or come to food the same way that land birds do. So if you're in a land bird rich area, blind photography tends to be a bit easier. So it went dark all of a sudden, but I prefer being out in the field.
Well, that's wonderful. And I think that that's something that we're excited to hear, because while we do have some blinds on these properties, just from my patience level, sometimes I can only sit in a blind for so long. So knowing that your guide is really going to be, is excited to do both and can do a mix of those things. And so you'll learn a wide variety of tips and tricks from Dorian. We're super excited about. And I'll tell you, what I'm super excited about is having you come from the West Coast, Dorian, and being our keynote speaker for our Birding with Extension dinner. You have a new book coming out?
No.
No. Oh, well,
No.
tell me your...
No, it's not finished. So it has been like a labor of love, and I'm still writing. So it is probably going to be another year before
well,
it's
you'll just
finished.
have to come back.
Yeah, exactly. But the story is the same. The presentation is the same with or without book. The presentation, when I've given it other places, minimal people have fallen asleep. Most are really engaged and excited. And I think I'm pretty animated when I talk on stage and things. So yeah, it'll be really exciting. I love giving talks, and I love kind of sharing the adventure. I mean, not many people ride a bike around the entire country for a year and cover 18,000 miles. So that alone, I think, is interesting to most people.
It's true. Not even I ride a bike down the street. So you got me with.
Well, and is kind of neat to share as well, because that's how the first time I met Dorian was at Birding the Hills. He gave that talk. That was probably 3.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
In Fredericksburg, Texas, and he gave that talk, and I was like, that was so cool, and it was very engaging, and I'm very excited that he gets to come and talk about that. But I have to say, the other thing that I'm excited about, I'm going to play off what Bill said a little bit, is he mentioned the taco bar, and there are some really unique just experiences that we have as part of Birding the Border, and that includes some of our trips have special lunches included. So as Emily mentioned, she's the food lady. She will always make sure that you are well fed and happy.
Well fed. Well fed. We've got to have good food, people.
But some of our places have extra special food. And so Zuberbuehler Ranch, where Bill will be with the beginners, that is a very historic ranch. It's been owned by the same family since the late 1800s. And they are going to cook those beginner birders and anybody else that goes out there kind of a chuck wagon style lunch. And that will be really special out there to eat in the field. And then where Dorian's going to McKenna, is that correct? She's also providing lunch. So the McKenna Ranch, which Dorian has a trip out there, and there's another opportunity to go there as well. She will also be providing a special lunch in the field, and that is another historic ranch that has been, I think that family's also had it since the late 1800s, early 1900s, maybe, a long time.
They've been there a while.
Yeah, long time, and so it's historic, and they're going to get to have a special lunch as well. So those are some other fun things to look forward to on those trips. And if you're curious as to which trips have lunches, that's on the site descriptions that are on the website.
Well, and I'm going to make one more plug, and then I promise I will shut up, is as we talk a little bit about bird photography, one fun thing we're going to do, and want to encourage everybody out there to submit their birding photography pictures, is we are going to be making our own birding loteria. Dorian, do you know what that is?
No, I don't. What is it? What was it?
Loteria.
No, I don't know what this is.
Bill, you know what loteria is, right?
Is it like a lottery?
Well,
No.
That's literally what it means in Spanish, but it's basically the Mexican version of bingo.
Bingo.
Ah.
Except
Yeah, but
ours has a
You play
little
with
bit of
pictures.
You play with pictures, and ours has a little bit of skill involved because what you're going to get, instead of the traditional Loteria cards which have, kind of traditional images on them, ours will have pictures of birds that people have
From
submitted.
everyone submit.
Yeah, you don't even have to be coming to Birding the Border to submit a photo. We have a list online of photos that we need, and then you'll get a card. And so the reader, the cantor, is what the caller's called, will call out a species, and you have to know your species to go on the card and mark that off, and then see if you can win your Loteria card.
And we'll be playing that at Birds and Beer, and I think there will be a little bit of money involved. Because we're going to do that as a fundraiser for some of our youth birding programs. The cards will cost everybody $1 to get your card, and then we'll split the pot with the winner. So it'll be super fun. Dorian, we do expect some pictures.
Oh yeah, I can send you guys some pictures, definitely.
Awesome. So thank y'all both for joining. We're super excited to have you both in Del Rio in next April. And registration out there, everybody, is open. If you have questions, let us know. We're more than happy to answer those. If you want a better understanding of those trips or the target birds, we can definitely get that information to you. So we're super excited for next April. And thanks for joining us for Cup Chat this morning. It was a super fun one. So thanks.
Excellent. I'm glad this worked out. I don't get a cup because I don't drink coffee. So.
Well, neither does Bill. Bill's lying. It's empty.
I wasn't going to reveal that. Mine usually has tea, so it's okay.
I have this. This
Rudy.
keeps me awake.
Oh, we heard about your puppy.
Rudy the Beagle. Yes, Rudy here. You're internet famous. So Rudy is my furry child. He likes the outdoors.
And we heard he's an Airbnb Beagle.
That's right. The Airbnb Beagle. He has a uniform and things which he wears to Airbnb events that my wife created for him because my wife works at Airbnb. So he's just this little guy and he's a lot of fun.
Oh,
but he wants breakfast, so he's starting to get a little bit aggressive.
That's fair. Well, we'll let y'all go so that nobody's dogs make mutiny. So
eat me. Yeah, exactly. All right. Excellent, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we will see y'all later.
Cheers.